Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tracing an extraordinary biological and cultural lineage, an ancient civilization that honestly, many people assumed had just vanished from the earth. But the past isn't lost. It's actually written right there in our very cells. Modern genetic research has completely rewritten history here, revealing that the Lebanese people today are the direct, unbroken descendants of the ancient Canaanites and Phoenicians. We're looking at a story of survival spanning millennia, preserved not just in ruins, but literally in our DNA.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the Canaanite heritage, discoveries from Ibiza, Canaanite survival, genetic communities, the Phoenician mutation, and finally, rewriting history.
Part 1. The Canaanite heritage revealed, setting the stage.
Part 2. Discoveries from ancient Ibiza, a multicultural Mediterranean.
For generations, history books painted this picture of ancient migrations as a series of brutal replacements, one empire conquering and just erasing another. But the Earth tells a totally different story. Archaeological discoveries in ancient cities like Byblos and Sidon have unearthed a rich, unbroken cultural thread. And here's where it gets wild. When we extract DNA from the remains found in these ancient coastal hubs, it perfectly matches the genetic makeup of the people living in Lebanon today. To really grasp the reach of this ancient DNA, we have to look beyond the Levantine coast, all the way across the Mediterranean to the Balearic Islands. At a scientific conference in Ibiza, Lebanese biologist Pierre Zalloua presented some groundbreaking results from a project analyzing ancient Phoenician genomes. This research completely flips the traditional narrative of one-way ancient invasions. When researchers analyzed Punic skeletal remains in Ibiza, those ancient bones actually showed stronger Levantine, or Lebanese, genetic markers than some samples taken directly from ancient Lebanon itself. And conversely, the ancient Lebanese samples carried way more European DNA than anyone expected. So genetically speaking, ancient Ibiza looked Lebanese, while ancient Lebanon appeared surprisingly European. What this reveals is a highly integrated multicultural Mediterranean society built on profound exchange, rather than just conquest.
Let's dive a little deeper into that genetic data. They analyzed 11 DNA samples from 4 different Phoenician sites in Ibiza, including the Puig Desmalines necropolis. The results were absolutely definitive. These Ibizan Phoenicians were genetically closer to the Neolithic early inhabitants of the Levant than to Bronze Age Europeans. Plus, they found a shared T2b haplogroup, which is a specific genetic lineage found in both the ancient Ibiza remains and Lebanese Phoenician samples. This shows a direct, continuous lineage. It essentially proves that Phoenician men from the Levant intermarried with local Ibizan women. They were creating a fluid, multicultural society through integration and marriage, not military conquest.
Part 3. Unbroken Canaanite Genetic Survival, the Breakthrough Study.
This brings us right back to the Eastern Mediterranean, and frankly, to a historical myth that desperately needs correcting. It's been falsely assumed for a long time that the Canaanites were completely wiped out during ancient conflicts, but science proves otherwise. Their bloodline didn't disappear. It is alive and thriving in the Levant today. Get this, modern Lebanese share a staggering 93% of their DNA with Canaanites from over 4,000 years ago. 93%! Despite millennia of invasions, shifting borders, and sweeping cultural changes in the region, this genetic continuity is remarkably unbroken. The Canaanites never vanished. They simply evolved into the modern Lebanese.
Because that continuity is just so incredibly strong, it leaves very little room for later genetic influence. In fact, remarkably, only about 7% of modern Lebanese DNA comes from later migrations, like the Arab conquest that happened after the 7th century CE. The vast, overwhelming majority of their genetic code remains deeply rooted in the ancient indigenous population.
This incredible survival really highlights Lebanon's role as a living bridge between the ancient and the modern world. Following the excavation of 160 ancient burials in Sidon, which, by the way, showcased some highly unique and enduring burial traditions, Lebanese archaeologist Claude Dumet-Serhal observed, "We all belong to the same people. We have a shared heritage we have to preserve." The historical idea of complete annihilation simply does not match the undeniable archaeological and genetic data we have today.
Part 4. Roots of Human Migration, Tracing the Ancient Journey.
To really grasp the gravity of this unbroken lineage, we need to zoom out and look at Lebanon's place in the broader context of humanity's ancient past. Understanding this heritage means tracing the timeline way back, over 180,000 years, to when modern humans first emerged in Africa. By roughly 40,000 BC, early groups spread out into Europe and Asia, branching off into distinct populations. Among these were groups that populated Europe, the Mediterranean, and settled deeply in the Near East. Geographically, Lebanon sits right at the center of this ancient convergence, making it a foundational hub for human civilization.
Part 5. Lebanon's diverse genetic communities, a tapestry of millennia.
Today, Lebanon's population is this incredibly complex tapestry of distinct communities. But right beneath the surface of all those religious and cultural differences lies a profound biological unity. Each group carries specific genetic legacies that have been shaped by millennia of history. We can see this really clearly when we break down the major groups. The Christians of Lebanon, like the Maronites, are direct descendants of ancient Canaanites and Phoenicians. The Druze? They're a genetically distinct Levantine group, deeply shaped by centuries of geographic isolation and strict endogamy, which is the practice of marrying strictly within their own community, forming a unique cluster. Alawites showcase mixed Levantine, Armenian, Arab, and Northern Eurasian roots. Orthodox Greeks hold primarily Mediterranean ancestry. Meanwhile, Sunni Muslims are a blend of 7th century Arab tribes and Phoenician ancestors who converted over time. And similarly, Shia Muslims trace a mixed ancestry of Iranian and indigenous Levantine roots, right alongside profound Phoenician heritage. But here is the key takeaway. Despite all these variations, that core Levantine baseline remains constant across the board.
And the distinctness of this population is actually further proven by what is absent. The Lebanese lack haplogroups like 1A, 1C, and 1L. Now, these are highly common in many surrounding Middle Eastern populations. This absence is absolutely critical. It proves they have a resilient, ancient genetic identity that was virtually untouched by later regional upheavals. The Lebanese show very limited genetic admixture from later Middle Eastern migrations. Instead, they share significant markers with ancient Mediterranean Europeans. So their preserved genetic signature heavily predates both the Arab and Ottoman conquests.
Part 6. The Phoenician Mutation Legacy. Biological Markers of Continuity.
This genetic isolation wasn't just an accident. Lebanon's history of mountainous isolation, driven by both formidable geography and the intense need to survive historical persecution, actually preserved an ancient biological legacy. This isolation not only protected their identity, but it also shaped their modern health in some really fascinating ways. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer footprint of an empire. It's called the Phoenician Mutation. This is a specific CFTR gene mutation linked to cystic fibrosis that is unusually common in Lebanon. Astonishingly, when you look at southern Europe, this exact mutation appears only in areas historically colonized by Phoenicians, places like Spain, Sicily, Malta, and North Africa. This serves as undeniable, hard-coded biological proof of Phoenician expansion and trade across the entire Mediterranean basin.
And the Phoenician mutation is just one marker. Because of that intense ancient survival, adaptation, and endogamy, certain inherited health conditions are strictly preserved today. These include hypercholesterolemia, sometimes called the Lebanese allele, Sandhoff disease, G6PD deficiency, familial Mediterranean fever, and mild inherited hearing impairments. These aren't just medical conditions, they are literal biological time capsules, highlighting an unbroken legacy spanning thousands of years.
Part 7. Rewriting History Through DNA. The Genographic Project. To truly map this out on a global scale, we have to look at monumental scientific efforts like the Genographic Project, which was a landmark global study mapping ancient human migrations. Guided in Lebanon by Dr. Pierre Zalloua and geneticist Spencer Wells, this project utilized cutting-edge DNA analysis to trace our exact ancestral journeys. This collaboration definitively answered the massive historical question of who the Phoenicians were and exactly where they went. By mapping these ancient migrations, the project confirmed beyond the shadow of a doubt that modern Lebanese connect directly to the enduring legacy of the Phoenicians, tracing a literal unbroken line from those ancient coastal city-states directly to the present day.
Part 8. Rewriting History. Final Takeaways.
So let's look at our final takeaways and see how all this builds a completely new, scientifically validated understanding of Western civilization's origins. We aren't relying on old assumptions anymore. We literally have the genetic code to prove it. Here are the definitive truths revealed by the DNA. First, the Canaanites never disappeared. Their direct descendants are the Lebanese today. Second, the linguistic and archaeological records confirm that the Phoenician alphabet, developed right there in Lebanon, is the very basis for modern Western alphabets. Third, Lebanon was the original Mediterranean superpower, a maritime empire thriving long before the rise of Arabs, Ottomans, or Europeans. Furthermore, Lebanese genetics vastly predate Islam, the Arab conquests, and Ottoman rule. And finally, genetically speaking, the Lebanese are actually more closely related to ancient Europeans than to modern Arabs, reflecting a deeply rooted, highly distinct Levantine population. Ultimately, the modern Lebanese preserve a remarkable genetic continuity with the ancient Canaanites and Phoenicians. The DNA of a people who fundamentally shaped our world continues to thrive, entirely unbroken, today. It truly illustrates one of history's longest documented continuities between an ancient civilization and a living population. It just goes to show that when genetics, archaeology, and history come together, they provide a far richer, undeniable understanding of our ancient heritage. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through time.